Loukas.
And I'm Vanessa Nova, and welcome back to another episode of the Cosmic Conduit podcast. I'm so excited to be here today with you all, and we are going to dive in today to the beautiful and feminine receptive archetype of Cancer. So yeah, let's get into it. Vila.
Yeah, so we're moving ourselves around the zodiacal wheel. So we were most recently visiting the sign of Gemini, the twins, and so now we have firmly moved into the energy of Cancer. So so exciting here. That means we're in the height of summer, which is kind of intriguing because Cancer is a water sign. Yet here we are, with this, Cancer comes in right at the same time as the summer solstice. And so we have the longest, brightest day of the year with all this fire energy. And then we have this water sign of Cancer. So it's an exciting and interesting opportunity to really understand the role of water, which metaphysically generally represents the emotional side of us.
Absolutely. This is our first time as we've gone through the journey. We have gone through fire, we've gone through air and water, and here we are at water. So this is our first sign of water, and it's our first kind of gathering of what is it that we need emotionally. And so that's kind of what we're looking at here with Cancer.
So we're completing our first set of those four elements. So we started with fire, we went on to earth and Taurus, we went into air and Gemini, and here's the completion of our first set of the four elements, which really lays that foundation of the energy for us in our, what makes us human, what makes this life what it is kind of thing with the four elements. So yes, so we've talked about physical needs, we've talked about air and intelligence and thought, and we've talked about, will and drive and passion. And now it's time, like you just said, Vanessa, to really dive into the world of emotions. So let's go to it. What do we know
about the world
of
water, the world of emotions? And I think that's where Cancer really has such a depth, literally depth to bring here. So what do we know about Cancer? So Cancer is ruled by the moon. And that brings in a lot of like this softness and receptivity and feminine nature and empathy.
And a lot of mystery, right? So there's a lot of those watery signs, and specifically Cancer, because not all the water signs are ruled by the moon, but Cancer very much is. So that ebb and flow, right? It's changeable, it's changing, it's constantly cycling. There's not, it's not a static thing where you're like, oh, this is what it is. It's like, it's going to be continuously moving and shifting and changing.
Just like water. So then when I think about Cancer people that I know, I think that they're the most like nurturing, caring people that I know. And I've had a lot of people in my life who are Cancers. One of my main Cancer role models was my godmother. And she wasn't even like, she wasn't biologically related to me, but she was like a mother to me. And she took our family in as her own family, and she was, one of the most nourishing and caregiving people that I ever met. So she definitely held that space of like a home and a family, and like making sure that everyone was being taken care of.
Okay, so you hit on some big ones. There's some big Cancer themes in what you just said. So mothering energy, right? So Cancer is the mother energy of the entire zodiac. And in many ways, it is it's like the uber feminine sign on the entire wheel. And so it's the most core in that sense of being nurturing, being receptive, and really being about home. When you think of the shell of the crab, like that's the point of it, is the shell itself. The shell is doing something, and what it's doing is creating a container, and we're going to be referring to that container a lot as we tease this out, because that's the whole point. So we have the word Cancer actually comes from the Greek karkinos, which refers to the shell. So the whole point of the crab itself is the fact that it carries its home on its back, right? It has a place to retreat into and to have this safe space, because inside the hard shell is this soft, gooey creature that can't protect itself without this, this hard shell, which is kind of a perfect analogy for the emotional side of ourselves.
I love the archetype aspect of this, because we can learn so much from just like dissecting, okay, it's a crab, what is a crab about? And so exactly that, like, it's so sensitive. The crab is so sensitive. And so that's kind of like inside the shell, what is there is like, all it is just sensitive, it's like it's very mushy, right?
Right.
So
Right.
what, we can learn from that, and that, that we need to create these boundaries, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to, all of this is also just like about knowing yourself. So what does Cancer show us or ask us, like, what do you need to know about yourself?
Yeah. And so another piece of Cancer is that it's also deeply creative, and because it's this cardinal water, it is this feminine, energy. It is this very receptive place where things get, really that shell represents the womb. It represents this container for creation to come about. And so there is this, kind of cauldron aspect of it too, right? Like what's stewing, what's stirring inside the container that is that Cancerian, boundary holding. So, boundary is another huge theme in Cancer. So we're going to dive into all of this. So I feel like that's a really good picture of what Cancer energy is about. So very much caretaking, caregiving, right? So very much about people, other people, and the relationships with other people. So very much that, what makes a mother is literally her relationship to another being that she is in charge of taking care of, right? So those themes are like embedded in what the energy of Cancer is all about. And so then there's kind of, how do we do that well? And then where does it get a little bit sticky, problematic, and like, ooh, this isn't quite working well. So where do we see those shadow aspects of the energy of Cancer?
Yeah, so because it's so oriented outwards to, oriented towards other people, like other people's needs. And that comes from also just like being so sensitive and empathic that, you're able to feel what everybody else is feeling, and able to like anticipate what everyone else's needs are. And it's kind of like in my journey with working with women, and working, in embodiment practice, and like learning to really like empower the feminine, what I've found is that, women in general, but also like even more so for mothers, is that there tends to be of always putting others' needs before the self. And I've seen that, like, and I think as women also, there's a tendency, women and feminine energy is a receptive energy.
Right.
And it's like we need to receive. But I think that women also, because of, programming, conditioning, have always been like conditioned to like give, and we don't immediately go into our receptive energy. And so I think it's a challenge as we step into our feminine power to actually learn to be receptive. So that's where we get into this like shadow place of like taking care of everybody else and then forgetting about yourself.
So this is so big, right? It's so big. And we almost need to do like 5 episodes on this topic, because there's so much to dig into on this piece, right? Of where we just get all kind of stuck energetically in these pathways where it's like the giving, the receiving, wanting to put out of the self, but then also needing to know how to receive. And so when that balance, when that infinity loop is off, when it either the one side is way small and the other side's really big, like we don't receive much, but we give a lot, then that brews resentment, right? That brews, a martyr kind of dichotomy, right? It brews a victim mindset of like, oh, I give so much and nobody does anything for me. And like, even though I'm thrilled when I'm in my giving side, right? But then on the other side, I'm like, oh, I'm not getting what I need, and nobody's taking care of me. And then it builds this bitterness. And so that ends up, causing all sorts of problems where then that where the receiving should be ends up being more of like this kind of manipulative undertow, right? Where it's like, I want to take things, or I'm going to do it either in this subconscious way or be manipulative in it, or, or what, that's kind of where we might develop like a codependent style, because it's like, I'm not getting my needs met outright. And so I'm going to find these sort of sneaky ways of getting it done.
Because what's happening is like your sense of self and your sense of getting your needs met is coming from and based on other people.
Right.
So like we need to come back, and ask, Cancer can ask you, what are your needs? Like, what is it that you need to be aware of in yourself so that you know what your needs are, and you're able to, meet those needs for yourself to a degree. Of course, like we can't get 100% of our emotional needs met from other people. And so when we're trying to do that, it becomes unsustainable.
Yeah.
And then that's where that resentment comes from. And that's where, like sort of this victim mentality. And there's also like, a lot of fear of abandonment tied into that as well.
Totally. So much so because of that like mothering aspect of Cancer, that it is the mother sign, right? So that's not a bad thing to have mother energy here. But there is that dynamic of either relating to the Cancer energy from that, like, I need something, and if I don't get it, this person is abandoning me, or I'm being abandoned in this process. So it's like, or if somebody isn't needing me, then they're going to abandon me because I'm not, fulfilling that purpose of like filling their needs. If they don't need me, they're going to leave me behind. And so they need to keep needing me.
Right.
But that I have a purpose, that I have a place, I have a way of defining myself that gives me meaning. And so
I have a great example. Yeah.
Please.
I'm just thinking of like, like a mother who's raised her children. Totally. And, she's built her whole identity, and, like that's fine. It's a beautiful thing, but we have to remember that we're multidimensional beings. So, in this example, the mother has raised her children up to the college, and then all of her children leave the nest. And then she's like at a loss for herself because she's no longer needed. Like, what am I even here for? Like, she has to redefine who she is and what her own needs are and her own like value and importance in the world and her family, because it's always been about taking care of her kids. And now their kids don't need her anymore to a degree,
And this is so much where, people end up developing, what we might refer to as mother issues, right? Because it's like then these dynamics exist in a mother relationship where it's like, there's this undertow, there's this hook, there's this like, oh, I'm going to get something from you because I've given so much. And so then there's this weird sort of feeling of obligation, like, oh, I'm obligated to go, do this thing and help take care of my mother's emotional needs because she's not doing it for herself, or something along those lines, right? And so it's a very, very, very pervasive patterning that exists in our culture, because ultimately we haven't learned to do what this, what we're putting forward here is, the new paradigm, or the sort of higher frequency expression of this Cancer energy, which is sustainable fulfillment, right? So to have that fulfilling of the needs, filling the emotional needs in a way that's sustainable. So we're going to totally tease that out. But I love how, in everything we've said so far, it's just constantly referencing, this is ultimately what we're after, is this way of getting our emotional needs met in a way that's sustainable and is balanced and is correct and feels good and all of that stuff. So let's tease this out. So fulfillment? What are we talking about there, Vanessa?
Well, when I think of fulfillment, and especially in the context of our emotional needs, it's again like you have to actually come back home to yourself first
Right. Home
to
to yourself.
actually
Yes.
and cancer is also about home,
Yes.
you know? So it's like coming home to yourself first in order to, really identify like what fills my cup, and
Exactly.
of course, like connection and caretaking other people is something in the Cancerian nature that would fulfill you. But, if you remove all that, like we do have specific emotional needs as human beings. Like some of that is like, to be seen, to be heard. And, like we can even break it down in a simple way to the five love languages, right?
Mm,
Like, what's your main love language? And, we can't 100% meet our emotional needs through other people, right? I said that earlier. So we have to be willing to, to a certain extent, fill our own cup. So, for example, you have to be willing, like, to, if your, main love language is physical touch or your main love language is quality time, like, are you willing to do that for yourself? Are
mhm.
you willing to spend time being in your body and loving your body? Are you willing to, spend time being with yourself? Because if it's like immediately only about like getting it from somebody else,
Right.
what's happening is you're coming from an unfull cup. The cup is
Exactly.
not full. So again, it's like you're never going to come from the cup being 100% full on your own, but you got to come to the table in your relationships in your life with it, your willingness and your ability to fill it up a little bit so that you're not coming from a place of deficit. You're not coming from a place of neediness.
Exactly. It's so really, I mean, what you're saying is it's a willingness to take responsibility, right? It's a willingness to say, I have needs and I'm going to be the one who's responsible for getting those needs met. And that automatically like shuts down that dynamic of somebody else identifying their, their purpose in the world through your needs, right? So, we see this in partnerships, we see this again, in family relationships. But like if somebody is living for somebody else, right? Like, oh, my purpose then is to fulfill this other person's needs, then they've abandoned themselves, right? There's this
Hmm.
already, I've taken myself out of myself to then go be doing this role that isn't mine to do, so it's like, so then that other person needs to from that place be like, my needs are my responsibility and it's not anybody else's job to fulfill those needs. It's my job to fulfill my needs. And so if everybody is operating from that place of like, this is my container, here's my womb space, right? Here's my Cancerian shell that's like my home, my well-being emotionally, and it's my job to keep filling that up. And then from, like you said, that full place, I go connect with somebody else who's also full, then we get to like, exponentially take it even further and have that, uber magic or, beyond, that ecstatic connection experience instead of it being, this sort of drain on everybody.
Right. As we're going through these new paradigm anchors and archetypes, like for example, sustainable fulfillment is what we're looking at here. The way I'm seeing it is we want to really be able to, from this visionary new paradigm place, recreate ourselves and see like what would it look like, expressing this archetype of Cancer without the negative ego, without attachments, without the
Mhm.
shadow.
Yeah.
And so if you can imagine a world where everyone is fulfilled, everybody's fulfilled, and that's because everybody's taking responsibility for their own needs, through and before and around meeting everyone else's needs as well.
I just got this fantastic visual as you were speaking that of like everybody as their own little crabs, right? You know, and like you think of hermit crabs, which have the bigger shells that, you know, sometimes look really cool and interesting. And like we're all carrying around our homes, you know, our emotional well-being, our sense of place and rightness and belonging in the world. Like if we're all just handling that for ourselves and we're like running around like, hey, here's you in a fulfilled place, and hey, you're in a fulfilled place, and you're, you know, like how fun is
Right.
that? You know, and
Right.
like, and then
Yeah.
everybody's shell looks different, you know, like the way you build your home space and take care of yourself emotionally and make sure you feel, you know, held and loved and connected to in the ways that you need to, because you're providing that for yourself, is totally different from what mine looks like. We could have designed, you know, our crab home.
Right. Isn't that great? And it's
I love it.
a beautiful vision of interdependence.
Yes, totally.
Because we
Totally.
need to be able to work together and to co-create together. But like when it comes to that, you know, codependent dynamic, then, you know, it looks like not sustainable, right?
Well, and so then exactly what you just said, we need to be able to work together when we have our shell space, you know, when we're taking care of ourselves well, and you know we've learned the art, we've mastered the art of doing that. What that means is we're also very good at the boundaries, right? We've learned, where is my shell, how far out does it go, and where is it not, you know, where does your shell start and where does mine, you know, where does mine end?
Mm,
And like, and that, because that's part of the problem, is those lines get very fuzzy, you know, where do your
right.
needs end and mine begin, and like how do we
Hmm.
navigate and negotiate that? If you know your shell really well, right, you know your needs, you know your boundaries, you can say, hey, you know what, I'm really excited to work with you, and here's what I need, you know, here are my needs, here's how this works, this is how I take
Right.
care of myself, how do you take care of yourself, you know? And so we get to know each other in that, and respect each other and regard each other and work together from a place of the sustainability of it. So there's the sustainable fulfillment, right? It becomes sustainable because I've taken responsibility to care for my own needs. You're taking responsibility for your own needs. We're not draining ourselves
Hmm.
by like contorting and going out and like, oh, I have to like do all this, you know, weird, you know, back bending to take care of somebody else in the way they want to operate, so that I don't get, you know, whatever, get in trouble with them, or, you know, have their emotional outbursts or that, you know, backlash. And so staying within the self and knowing, you know, you're going to stay within yourself, and we're going to communicate well from our place of center in our, you know, in the center of our home shell.
Yeah. And it just really, you know, comes back to, again, because Cancer is so oriented outside the self, it's like you have to know yourself and what your needs are first.
Right.
Like it's asking you to really like become aware, and then, you know, have mastery of your own emotional needs. Because you know, that comes from a lot of people, you know, who are empathic. It's just so hard, like you said, to know what's yours and what's not yours. So it does take a commitment to coming back to yourself and asking, like, what do I need emotionally, and what does that look like?
And you know, sometimes we might not have that all figured out, and so, you know, that's another place where, you know, like I was saying at the beginning with, you know, Cancer being watery, there is a lot of give and take and up and down, and that lunar cycle of like, we don't, it's not always concrete, although the shell is very physical, right? But where those lines are, what kind of bandwidth we might have in a given moment, it's not necessarily like, okay, I have 85, not, you know, 85 units of capacity at all times, you know, that's not going to be how it works, right? So sometimes I may be at a 25 and other times I'm at a 95. And so, you know, that's part of know thyself, is understand where you're at with what you have to offer, what you have to give, and what you're ready to then receive. And that comes back to that sustainability, right? So that's that infinity loop, that I'm receiving at the same, you know, balance point, the same, you know, reference point to then how I'm giving, or what I'm giving has a return that is balanced. It's another
Mm,
helpful way of looking at it.
yeah, that's beautiful of that, finding Finding that mastery of the balance between giving and receiving is really what we're looking at here because, like we do want to connect. We're like wired to connect and we want to give and love. But like, how much are you willing to receive love and how much are you willing to love yourself?
And that's something that's been said a lot over time, right? Is you can only experience love from somebody else to the degree that you are loving yourself. And I very, very, very much believe that to be true. And I think in my own journey, as a woman, coming into adulthood and finding partnership, I had to learn that. I was in a pretty, not great codependent relationship in my 20s that was really not a good situation and led to a lot of problems for me. And I had it, but it taught me a lot, right? It taught me like these lessons right here of cancer, where it's like, I can't make my sense of self and my sense of well-being dependent on somebody else and their opinion or perspective or validation of me. I have to do all that for myself. And when I'm doing that for myself, I can find somebody to match me and we can start giving and receiving from there. Otherwise, there's no way to have a sustainable, give and receiving art, loop, right? And that's the art is finding that and then being matched with somebody that has the right kind of rhythm and volume for you, right? Where it's like, if you have somebody who wants to have a smaller loop, like, okay, great. You need to find a match versus then, how much are you wanting to give and receive for yourself and for somebody else?
I mean, it's more obvious to see it, through relationships. But I
Yeah.
think even for us as healers, we're healers, we're, caretakers, we're teachers, we guide other people, and our profession is holding space for other people. So, for me, it's also really been a journey of like, being vigilant of, am I taking care of myself? And, I had a lot of sort of like big eye opening experiences where, on certain levels, I was taking care of myself because I was taking care of a big community and a big wellness center and a big space that I was holding for others. And of course, there was things that I did for myself and I, did the best that I could to take care of myself, but there's always room for
Yeah.
improvement. And there's also, these sneaky, shadowy places where, like we don't see where we're not taking care of ourselves because it's so deeply ingrained.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. That's so true. I love that you brought that piece in because, in our world of work, yeah. So as individual work, that we do one-on-one with clients as healers, there's that, the importance of that exchange, right? Of how that and how what we're giving and then comes back in what we're receiving, but also as teachers and, as priestesses. I just led a solstice ceremony the other night and it was a huge output. It was a huge giving. The amount of energy that it took, building up to the ceremony and then the ceremony itself. And so for me on the other side, I needed a lot to come back. And what's so amazing in the world of Wicca, so that was a, Wheel of the Year ceremony, is that it's so, I even spoke this to the group that, to get to serve as a priestess is an amazing honor. It's an amazing privilege to be the vehicle through which these energies come, right? And so it's so worth it to me on so many levels because I get fed in a way that I can't happen in any other circumstance. But it also takes a team, so I have to be clear on my boundaries, right? I have to be clear on what my needs for the support that's required to allow me to serve in that role. And then also, it takes, for me, this particular one was so intense. It took, 2 days of recovery on the other side because the energy was just so big and so high and just, so much logistics that we were going through. But I know that about myself. So I planned that in my schedule. My husband is incredibly supportive. So, we had that time carved out. We went and did fun stuff. we went to the pool, we got in the water, we did things that were helping to bring back that nourishment. And we planned for that. We put that in the structure, which is a huge part of that sustainability, is knowing yourself well enough to know what my needs are going to be on the other side of whatever it is I'm giving, so that I can make sure that I'm receiving. And then I may not know exactly what I need. I didn't know for sure that I wanted, the pool. So maybe we wanted to go to the lake or to the river or something like this. But so having the willingness to be present in the moment with myself, and the flexibility to say, okay, here's how I'm taking the responsibility to get my needs met based on what's showing up for me at this moment. So it's very much an art.
Right, absolutely. Well, I think maybe one more, I want to bring in one more point maybe, because I'm thinking about as you're saying this, I'm thinking also about just the concept and the practice of sustainability in general. Like, we're here on this planet, and only, the last couple of decades have we actually started to learn a new way of operating to have sustainability, because we're here to take care of Mother Gaia, right? Mother Gaia is the mother, right? Like the ultimate physical mother that we're living on as an organism. So we've had to and it's still like a huge process right now in the world as we're learning to create more sustainability in our environment and our industries, and focus on that. It's like a new way of operating. Totally. So that's it's also just parallel to how we take care of ourselves and how we operate in relationship and community, in our work, and all of the areas, is that once we're orienting ourselves towards that sustainability, we then can create a new way.
I love this conversation, Vanessa. I feel like it's so profoundly fundamental. You know what I mean? Because it's like this piece, this thing that we're talking about, this infinity loop, is, it's that pattern, like you just said, it replicates all over the place. And so however we do that piece for ourselves is going to get replicated everywhere. And, as a mother, I feel like, wow, I want to be sure my kids get it. You know what I mean? That they get this piece, because that will start to define everything about how we build our worlds. How do we build that home? How do we build that shell? And then from that shell, how do we go out into the world to do what we're going to do?
Right.
So super cool. Yeah.
I mean, and it's just like, it's kind of obvious, right? It's kind of like these things exactly. It's obvious. Like, if you're going to give, you need to make sure you take care of yourself. But it's like such a unconscious, subconscious pattern that we need to overcome. And it's just like, duh, you need to do that to be sustainable. But it doesn't, it hasn't worked that way probably for many generations.
Well, and that's part of it, because it's at that such a core level of mother, right? So mother, child, this is birth. This is how life, comes about. And so it's at that. So it's easy for that to go unconscious, because it starts at infancy. It starts at the very, very, beginning of life. And so if we don't bring awareness and consciousness to it, it's very easy for that to just fall into the fabric of the makeup of all things. And then all of a sudden we have this, distorted, contorted shell that we can't manage. And, how do you go about reshaping it? So more on that as we come into our ceremonial Magick together later this month, right? So with the new moon, July 17th, is that our date?
July 17th.
Yes. So we're going to be circling up, and we're going to be working exactly with this energy. So we're going to be working with the Magick of Cancer and how to be doing this for ourselves. So we'd absolutely love to have you join us live, this live event happening. So Pacific time, we start at 7:30, and then, you can round that out to all the different time zones. And it's, we go for about an hour and a half. It's an amazing, growing community of like-minded people, and we'd love to have you join us.
Absolutely. It's an incredible opportunity to really have an embodied and experiential practice and support in order to transcend and to anchor sustainable fulfillment and the highest arc of Cancer. So working with that in your own in your own system and your own energy field as we facilitate that for you. So absolutely would love to have you join us. You can find all the information linked to the podcast and to our descriptions. You'll find all the information you need, but we'd love to have you.
And we keep these conversations going. So we have an online community, our Cosmic Conduit online community. You are welcome to join. We have our network on University for the Soul. You can find the links here. You can jump on that. And then if you'd like to join us on the 17th for the live event, you can register for that and keep it going, because there's so much for us to gain here. And the more we can find these fundamental pieces and start to shift them and work the magic for ourselves, the more we're going to literally change the world.
Absolutely. Blast off.
As always, it's such a delight and such a joy to get to share these conversations. Please follow, like, subscribe, all those good things, and we'll see you again very soon.
Thanks. Bye.